Hello, and welcome to our pricing podcast, Pricing Interviews with the Experts. I am Lisa Fisher, the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications with the Professional Pricing Society. Today, we are so happy to feature our special guest, Stephan Liozu, Chief Value Officer of Thales Group. Follow him on Twitter at Stephan Liozu, and his website is stephanliozu.com. Our topic of discussion for today is best practices in pricing transformation. Stefan, how are you? And thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm great. Pleasure to be with you today.
Great. Let's go ahead and get started. So, transformation is much more than a pricing program or project. Pick your words carefully. Do you need to call your project a transformation?
Yes, and that's a critical question. I would say in many organizations, we like the word transformation. But for a lot of people hearing the voice transformation, it can be very scary. So I always recommend when you are starting big initiatives around pricing, it's not to start using transformation from the get-go. Now you may end up being in a transformation, but you got to keep in mind what's happening around you. And I'll give you an example. So that's something that I'll discuss during the summit, the virtual summit, and in Chicago is in Thales, in the Thales group. It's a group that is in total transformation because of the nature of the business and what we've done for the past 5 years, right? But we're doing literally about a dozen transformations in the group. So ask yourself the question: if you're a pricing executive or a professional today, do you want to add transformation number 13 or number 12 on top of all the transformations? And this is where I get into the choice of the right word for the initiative. So a program is not perceived the same as a transformation or an initiative. So picking the right word is important for this, but also, are you doing a pricing transformation? Are you doing a margin improvement transformation? Are you doing a value project, a value program? So, and those, once you select the words and you can and the context, they're going to stick with you for quite a while. So you got to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we focus a lot on strategies and tactic execution of pricing, less on the upfront design of a very strategic project. Pricing journeys obviously need deep design upfront. Who designed your pricing journey?
Well, and that's another one of these critical considerations. So, it depends on how your pricing teams are set today. So if your organization, for example, has a VP of pricing, well connected to the C-suite, or if you have a team that's a bit more isolated with a manager of pricing. Um, so some people are better at strategizing about projects and programs and how they fit in the overall organizational structure. Um, but you do need to spend quite a bit of time contextualizing and strategizing your pricing initiatives. So if you're designing, for a pricing transformation, it's not going to be the same as designing for a pricing analytics projects. That's what I mean. So, and what I mean by upfront design is really looking at what's happening in the organization, understanding the dynamics of the organization, applying some of the early principles of change management with the sense of urgency, the visioning, who's going to get involved, the stakeholder mapping, and then putting together a roadmap that's well designed, right, from the get-go, and not forgetting, for example, that you have to bring sales on board the design. So when you're in discovery phase, early on, the thinking about what you're going to do, you got to involve sales, finance, and all the stakeholders that will be important in whatever you're doing, transformation program or initiative. So, for me, for example, I spent in Thales about 6 months really understanding what's happening to be able to design with my boss, the chief marketing officer. This is the best way for us to go after this program and to be successful. So my question to the audience is, how have you designed your overall pricing initiative or pricing journey? and did you jump too fast in the tactics? And that's a little bit of my concern, Lisa, is a lot of people get very anxious and they receive top-down instructions. We have to improve margin. We have to get started. We have to put that system, and then they immediately work in execution, tactical mode. All right. So that's
Right,
the
right.
thinking there.
Okay, great. So, Stefan, we can also agree that complex organizational structure can make or break a pricing journey. Navigating complex structures is definitely a required skill, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and it's very much tied to what I was saying before. You know, you really have to understand the complexity of your organization, and the complexity is some of that is visual. You could look at, or I have 25 business lines, or I have 30 divisions, or I have six major business units. I have 16 regions. I have two types of sales team, tactical and strategic account management. So, you need to look at all these dimensions and say, well, all these people, I need them in my program. I need them to be involved in my journey, right?
Hmm.
And some of that stuff is not visible. The cultural, differences, the political clans, there are, believe it or not, in companies, clans, not gangster or gangs, but there are clans, and
Sure.
strong leaders with their followers, other leaders with their followers, and sometimes they don't get along. So you may have informal tensions, and all that stuff is what I refer to as far as complexity. Those are visible, formal, informal, and invisible dynamics that you need to take into consideration in your design upfront of your journey. And obviously, if you make some bad assumptions or if you make some bad decisions at the beginning, you may end up facing lots of resistance, right?
Hmm.
And some divisions, for example, may say, no, I'm not going to do it, or I want to go last. Some cultures may not adapt very well or may refuse your tool. So it's a little bit like pricing. People need to be organizational scientists at the very
Right,
beginning, right?
right. That's a different topic for our next podcast, right?
Yeah.
So, Stefan, how would you recommend or suggest someone or an organization spend their first 6 months in their transformational journey?
Yes, so I recommend first of all to listen, 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 listen. So if you have the opportunity to take some time to really study and what I mentioned before, getting to design workshops, understanding the true organizational needs, surfacing the sense of urgency, doing assessments of what capabilities you have, getting a pulse on the pricing culture. This is ideal. Now, the reality is some people, they get in the position or they get promoted and then they have 2 weeks to do this, or here is a project, go get it done. But you could still do in parallel of being very tactical, you have to take the time, at least the first 3 to 6 months, um, to listen and to gauge what's really happening so that you could design an awesome roadmap. And
Hmm.
that time up front that you invest it could potentially make or break your entire transformation for 3 to 5 years, right? So
Hmm.
it's like the famous book from Watkins. The first 90 days you listen, you study, you
Hmm.
assess, you evaluate, and then you go, here is my roadmap with the right stakeholders, and you drive.
Right. So, speaking of pricing design, there are four pricing designs to work with: centralized, decentralized, center led, center supported. Which one is the best for your journey, do you think?
Well, there's not one that's best in general, hypothetically, right? There is one that's
Hmm.
appropriate for the transformation that you're doing, for the journey that you want to do, for how you're gonna, align your programs with maybe the rest of the transformations, marketing and sales, depending on who's transforming. Uh, we went in Thales with center supported, and I'll explain why. So you have to show up in the virtual summit and join us in Chicago. But generally speaking, the most common ones are centralized and decentralized. Because of the nature of your culture, because of the way your divisional structure is put together. Center led is another way of doing decentralized, but you're leading more from the center, from the headquarters, from the central teams, and you're leading the divisions to the transformation. The center supported is less leadership. You convince them and they do their own leadership, which is a whole different approach to change management and to deploying strategic projects in pricing. Now, the key thing here, Lisa, is you may start a journey with centralized and realize quickly in 2 years later that you need to decentralize, either because the CEO wants to decentralize or because you haven't been successful in convincing the region. So you may change to a center-led and eventually fully decentralized. So there's not one organizational design that's going to be good for 5 years. You're gonna pretty much change 2 or 3 times your design, and that's key.
Excellent. And then finally, Stefan, what would you recommend to start with, a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach?
Well, again, it depends. If the fire is all around in your organization, if the house is on
Mm,
fire, chances
right.
are you're gonna get a top down, and it's not your choice. The pressure will be on. If you're successful and your company is very good at producing cash flow and EBIT or profit,
Mhm,
then it's going to be difficult to do a top down because people are not going to understand it, right? So you're going to have to do a bottom up,
mhm,
right? And but along the way, your transformation, and this is something that happened in Thales. In Thales, things are going very well, and I'll show the evolution of our profit and sales during my presentations. But everything is
mhm.
going well. So then I had to do a bottom up for the first 2.5 years, and eventually convince the top that they need to get involved to accelerate because the profits we generated through pricing transformations were great, right? So they realized that wow, we could do a little faster, transformation. So along the way your journey, you will change, and you will eventually it will be a hybrid of a top down and bottom up in convincing the culture and convincing everybody to jump on board. So, and this is where again back to the organizational scientist, you need to gauge that, you need to sense that the pulse of the organization, and for that, Lisa, this is a skill that we need to develop more in pricing people, social intelligence and emotional intelligence, so they can really sense what's happening.
Excellent. Well, I believe you and I, Stefan, could talk about best practices in pricing transformation for about 2 more hours. However, this was just a teaser, and we'd like to thank you for giving us just the icing on the cake, really, for this topic. If you need to talk to Stefan or reach him further on this topic or others, you can reach him at sliozu@gmail.com. But if you're really interested in digging deeper in this topic, please register and join us for the PPS Virtual Summit on March 4th. Well, Stefan will definitely take a deeper dive. And we are also happy to headline Stephan Liozu yet again in Chicago with a keynote presentation entitled Not All Pricing Transformations Are Created Equal. So join us in Chicago, April 28th through May 1st at the 31st Annual PPS Spring Pricing Workshops and Conference at the Lowe's Chicago O'Hare Hotel. Our full program and brochure will be on our website shortly. Visit us at www.pricingsociety.com. Get social with PPS and subscribe to our compelling blog, The Pricing Authority. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Pricing Society. And finally, don't miss out on the latest revenue management, thought leadership, and pricing discussions on LinkedIn, the largest pricing group with over 14,000 members. Connect with the Professional Pricing Society. Stefan, anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
Yeah, I will, definitely invite them to join us because it's always a great event in Chicago. That's my favorite conference, and the virtual summit is for you an opportunity to also attend. So, I will be pleased to see you all, and also please connect with me on LinkedIn if you see me there.
Awesome. Stefan, thank you again. And for all you pricing professionals listening out there, stay tuned for future pricing podcasts where other industry experts join us to share their pricing best practices. Thanks again, Stefan, and we'll see you soon.